This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so welcome everyone. This is Rolanders. This is actually our last presentation of the series. It's been great being with you for these weeks and hearing such wonderful presentations. Uh, Tonight we have Al Nollmeyer, who literally wrote the book on message handling for ARRL, and uh, and Robin, who's very active here in our local Maryland, DC nets, CW nets, and they're going to give you an introduction to uh, message handling and the national traffic system and some of the other more modern uh, evolutions of the NTS that have occurred over the years. So, with no further ado, let me turn it over to my friend of many, many years, since all the years I've been in ham radio virtually, Al W3YBQ.
Good evening, all. This is Al W3YBQ. How's the level?
It's good.
Very well. I've been in amateur radio since 1954, so I have some white coloring on some of my hair as well, but there's no camera on this computer to prove it. I have to take my word for it, but there's plenty. And I've been a races officer in the county and in the state for most of the tail end of the last century, and a section-wide staff member for the league, for the NTS, and as ASM for coordinating ARIES, races, and NTS activities in MDC. And during those early years, I did a lot of research in forensic error control, that is, designing ways to reduce errors rather than detecting them later and trying to fix them when it's too late. And one of the products of that was a methods and practices guideline, a document I produced and was published on the ARL's web fleet as the methods and practices guidelines, as Appendix B is in Bravo of the ARRL's program, Public Service Communications Manual. And the MPG is still available at ARRL.org. Just search for MPG. And that contains a number of chapters on topics such as formatting the radiogram, exchanging the radiogram with another station on voice, and a third chapter on exchanging radiograms on CW, a fourth chapter on how to run directed traffic nets, which give us a means to control a lot of business in a radio gathering so that everybody gets a good chance to list their business, and the net control's responsibility is to see that all of it is handled in an expeditious fashion, getting as much traffic moving in parallel as possible, traffic meaning the exchange of radiograms or possibly informal traffic, etc. So directed traffic nets are a foregone conclusion in tonight's presentation. They are at the roots of the system. So what we're going to be talking about tonight is how the national traffic system is structured. So how radiograms are propagated throughout the system all over the country using the manual nets, voice, and CW, and a second tier of explanations about how our more recently evolved digital traffic network run by Radio Relay International operates with HF backdoor forwarding of radiograms via hub stations all over the country in a large radio all-the-way mesh network that has dynamic routing, but ultimately routes radiograms by the addressee the same as we do in the manual systems, but it's done electronically by control hub software and the HF backdoor modems and HF stations, listening and operating on multiple bands and frequencies all over the country at various locations. And that system is essentially a parallel digital version of the NTS. And the third topic tonight will be on the WinLink radio email system, which is a very powerful new resource where we can actually let our customers create their own emails in their own email applications on a PC and forward them to the area station on site. And we send those radio emails out in the standard radio email format to stations anywhere on the WinLink network. And that's virtually nationwide real time. It only takes a minute or two for a message from here to California to arrive at a station out there where it has to be manually pulled off and delivered. So to get started, the first important question we have to address, which is the underpinning for this whole business of handling formal messages, and that is, why do we need formal written record traffic? It's key to being able to work with our served agencies today, as well as the public and their welfare traffic needs. You can't remember everything I say as a tactical operator very efficiently. If I said Route 239 was open, but the bridge at 245 was shut down at mile 26, and there are 3 accidents over on I-83, and ask you to read it back, you have a very good possibility of making a mistake and forgetting it within 30 seconds. Consequently, as a practice in ARIES and RACIS and NTS, we record our information on paper, and it's either done directly by our customer or served agency and hand it to us, or we transcribe it for them, and we transmit formal record written traffic where all of that information I just spouted out can be transmitted in a way that the receiving station can comfortably record it exactly as sent. The objective being error-free transmission of formal written record traffic. So in the Emergency Operating Center, government and non-government agencies use this philosophy all the time when they're preparing for a disaster or providing mitigation or services during the disaster and during recovery. There's a great deal of information that has to get passed, and rather than rely on amateur radio operator memories, it's written, and we transmit written traffic. We can do this manually or digitally. The messages are created in writing. They're signed by officials who are charged with legal agency, meaning the message is sent on their authority, and they are responsible for the content. We do not have agency for handling EOC or Red Cross messages and affecting the content. The person signing the message is solely responsible for that, and we are not authorized to alter it in any way whatsoever. In addition, these agencies have message centers where they log stuff that's written and going out to another location. In a message center, which is usually one guy running a PC, and he keeps a list of every message that's created and to whom he gave it to be sent, and makes note of its dispatch time. And when a reply comes in, he matches it up and makes sure the originator gets his reply. All inbound and outbound written traffic, therefore, is accounted for. And the decision makers use the process, whether they're just gathering intelligence or issuing orders in writing to people to do things in the field after they learn what is needed. So we fit into that picture as conduits for that formal record written traffic. We do use tactical voice communications from time to time. For example, they might ask us as a radio operator, how many hams do you have down at the Red Cross shelter on Front Street? And we might get that answer and tell them verbally. But if they are really serious about adding that into a list of manning, they will usually send the formal written message to that Red Cross shelter asking for a manning report, and they will respond with a formal record written message back to the EOC that we handle an amateur radio containing the reply information. So we're there involved to communicate, not to administrate. We don't run their communications, we provide the conduit for it. And of course, we help by training them. Notice the interesting turn of words in how we operate and how we do this, so that during actual emergencies, they're familiar with how to get along with us and we them in order to accomplish the mission. And therefore, we must be competent in handling formal written record traffic. That is how to write down a properly formatted message containing the information legibly and reproducibly so that it can be transmitted accurately. We must be familiar with those message center practices trusted by the officials. And most of all, we must be competent in handling formal written record traffic error-free. Error-free, you ask? With your ears perked up like that's not possible. Well, unless you strive with every effort you can bring to bear to make it so, you'll run afoul of the next sentence. Ask any emergency manager how many errors they'll tolerate per message. The answer is always 0. And a mistake in a number or a word or a proper name can lead to harm, ineffective missions, or even death. So error-free is our motto in this business. And we have designed these methods and practices that we use to transmit the radiograms to reduce that error rate to 0 to the best of our ability. Anybody have any questions on that topic? Because it's a cornerstone of everything we do. And it's the last we're going to be talking about it here tonight. We're going to talk about the pipelines next. Any questions? Okay. These are the 3 message networking systems that I talked about at the opening: the manual voice and CW networks, the digital traffic network, and the digital radio email network. These slides will all be part of the presentation that Roll will make available to you. You can read up on the details and the corners of how the system operates in some detail at your leisure, because I'm going to be diagramming all 3 of these network schemes so that you can see in greater detail how they work. And as I go through the manual parts that I'm going to do next, I'd like you to be aware that we have with us Robin Schaefer, Alpha 3 Sierra Bravo, who's been in the national traffic system with us for decades and decades. I won't say exactly how many. It's not nice to ask a lady how old she is or infer it by any other unscrupulous technique. But Robin has been pounding brass with us on CW in the NTS for decades and is currently the net manager of our section level CW NTS net that meets twice daily in the evenings. So we'll get to her for some comments as we go through. So these are the 3 messaging networks that we will be discussing tonight. Tutorials on how to format messages and transmit them or exchange them with other stations is a separate tutorial topic that generally takes 2 4-hour sessions in 1 day or 2 days. And our section traffic managers throughout the country do this on a regular basis. So I might mention right at the outset, if you're curious about where to train in this topic, contact your local section manager of the ARRL in your section. Their names, addresses, and phone numbers are published in QST magazine and on the ARRL.org website. Give them a phone call and they'll hook you up with the section traffic manager to get in touch with those who do the training and the net operations, etc., for your convenience. Now, in these messaging networks we have, there are different kinds of messages that are used. The first on the left-hand side under message type is the legacy radiogram, the green title. This is the old legacy radiogram which evolved from the old Western Union telegram. It has a preamble in it for tracking information, an address, text, and signature. And it is to be transmitted in the manual modes, even though it may also be carried digitally, but it must be able to pass through all modes. So it's all caps, figures, and slant bars only. All other punctuation is written out as a word or a substitute character. And you'll see on the right-hand side, all 3 of the networks we discussed can handle the legacy radiogram. The manual nets handle the plain text. In the RRI DTN column 2, radiogram is handled in batch files that are posted directly onto the hub stations, and they're automatically forwarded by address to other hubs to get it close to the point of delivery. And that's done in the background. You don't have to do anything to make that happen. You just post the message if you're a digital traffic station, and off she goes. And the third layer can handle radiograms as well, and that's the radio email layer, which is a national server system. It's actually global, now worldwide, that is accessible by 3 mechanisms: the telnet over the internet, via local packet stations using Vera Packet, or local or area-wide HF gateway stations via HF Pactor or Vera HF. And they exchange messaging in the email format, but you can attach radiograms to a text file and let them tag along. A hybrid radiogram in the left column, the middle one, is a radiogram just like the legacy, but it may carry an email formatted text between the breaks. You'll see what that looks like in a few moments. That's a special form of radiogram. It cannot be handled on the manual nets except using a special protocol for carrying punctuation, symbols, and upper and lowercase character designators, etc. So it's generally handled by the digital traffic network, again using the same attachment technique, where the hybrid radiogram with its email formatted text is posted on DTN. It goes all the way through to the addressee, routed by addressee to the closest point of delivery where it can be delivered digitally. And it can also be handled by WinLink in a fashion similar to a radiogram as a text attachment, since upper lowercase and punctuation is permitted there. And the third message type on the left column is radio email, which looks just like the email message on your email app on your PC, with a 2-line, copies line, a body text, where you place also a signature, and it will accept binary attachments such as text files, doc files, GIFs, JPEGs, etc. That can be transmitted only on the radio email system via WinLink, again using either direct internet connection to the servers or packet radio connections to the gateway stations, which then connect to the servers, or HF Pactor or Vera HF to connect to an HF gateway, which might be in another state. And the beauty of the WinLink system is not only that it transmits in radio email format, but it has a firewall bridge to the public internet, so you can actually post messages on WinLink that get passed to the internet addressees, as well as stations who are clients on WinLink. And you can do it over the internet on VHF packet radio or HF. That's a powerful box of capabilities there that amateur radio sports these days. There are hundreds of other digital modes. If you're looking at investing in your club or in your group, consider the ones that are widely in use and the most widely usable. WinLink is at the top of that list. Now, if we go on to manual voice and CW nets, I'll spend a few moments here showing you what a typical manual net cycle looks like in the NTS and Radio Relay International. Depending upon what part of the country you're in, these cycle diagrams are all the same. There's an area net that covers 1/3 of the country at the top of the pyramid. And starting up the left-hand side in the Christmas tree at the bottom are local nets, like a 2-meter net that handles radiograms. And somebody might have one going out of the area, so he posts the message on his local net. The radiogram is exchanged with the liaison station. He carries it to the section early net, which is the left-hand orange box with 1900 over it. In our case here in Maryland, it's called MDD, a joint Maryland, DC, Delaware net. And if the message can't get off there to go someplace else in Maryland, it goes up through the green liaison to a region net. The region net handles all of the sections that are in the third call area: Eastern PA, Eastern PA, Western PA, Delaware, Maryland, and District of Columbia. If a message can get off there to one of the sections, it can be exchanged with the liaison there, who will take it laterally to the late third region net to the right, and the message will go down to section for delivery. But if on the way uphill it can't get off at the region position, the green arrow marked TX will allow a liaison to carry it up to the area net, and at the area net are liaisons from first region, second region, fourth region, eighth region, central area, and western area. So wherever a message is going, if it can't be given off to one of the other four regions, it will go to CAN or WAN to move across the country. And after the area net gets done exchanging all the traffic between the region reps and the CAN and WAN rep, the cycle continues down the right-hand side of the Christmas tree to the late region net, where all the sections meet again, like MDC and PTN, the Pennsylvania Traffic Net, and they divvy up the traffic for their local sections. And in our case, for MDD, the messages come down to late MDD at 10 p.m. and then on to local nets if there are any. I'm sorry, I hit the roller wheel by mistake. The messages come down to local net perhaps the next day. And the same applies to traffic going to a CAN and WAN. Those nets meet an hour later from the area net or more, so traffic can easily flow through these liaisons to the central and western areas. But traffic coming back is handled by these green reps at the top of the screen, who are called IATN and TCC reps. IATN is Inter-Area Traffic Net, run by RRI, and TCC, which is the Transcontinental Core, managed by the NTS. The two organizations split a number of years ago, so one or the other handles the traffic. So that's how the Christmas tree works. Now, Robin, who was here with us tonight, is the manager of our MDD section net for the early and late sessions. Robin, how did you get started in NTS, and what do you do for a living for us?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I able to be heard?
Yes, fine.
Okay, fine. Very good. So a friend of ours from our church, ours meaning my husband Rusty and 3WKE and I, told us that he found through his brother, who's been a ham operator forever, but lived in a different state. He had gone to visit him, and he fell in love with amateur radio in North Carolina. Of course, he isn't living in North Carolina, so when he came back to Maryland, the first thing he did was find out where he could connect up with amateur radio operators in the Baltimore area. And he found Al and the Baltimore Traffic Net, and which I think is all he had the license for at that moment. And then remember, this is the time when there were like 7 levels of licenses. They've fixed that. In any case, he was talking to Rusty about it. Rusty got a little radio. Rusty's my husband. He got a little radio, and I decided the guys were having too much fun without me. So I also started studying for the amateur radio license. Morse code was a requirement at the time, and I love Morse code, and I still do Morse code probably 5 nights a week, if not 6 or 7. It depends on what else is happening in the house or the family on that particular night. So that was that was really the part that, if anything, kept me in, and also got me to higher level nets, which I find sometimes are difficult to find and or communicate with, but that just teaches you more stuff about radio. So it is really a cool thing to do. And occasionally you hear Morse code in movies or a stage play or something like that. There's a really funny anecdote about the show South Pacific, which I was in high school, but and as a bassoonist of all things. But in any case, the there's a place where the oboe player or clarinet player plays um, quote Morse code unquote. But there's a story about that somebody in like New York or something, they were having the show and they said the oboist wasn't having a good night and he was taking it out in Morse code. And at the intermission, somebody came down to him and said, "Honey, you are not the only person that understands Morse code. You might want to clean it up." So that music being my other thing, I was a church organist for 30 years. Music being my other hobby, I got to hear little stories like that, and that was always a lot of fun. So, but like Al said, I'm the net manager for the Maryland and Delaware DC Traffic Net. We do Morse code. If people aren't slowing down when people need to, and I will tell you, there's some nights. And sometimes it's me, my head, and sometimes it's the atmospheric conditions or whatever. If I'm sending you QRS, which is a Q signal for Robin Schaefer, you had darn sight better be slowing down. Al knows it well, and most of the people on the net know it too. When I get into higher nets, I get it. I was like, no, I'm serious. I can't copy your speed. Please slow down. And I don't feel guilty about it either. Or sometimes I might say, and when it's really true, conditions are bad. I really need you to slow down. But either way, I really mean it. I'll just, there have been times that I've not that I wanted to, but just said, "I'm sorry, I can't copy you," because that's the truth. And I wasn't going to be able to get the radiogram through correctly. And that's what we do. We always make sure it goes through 100% the way it was sent to us by the first person who put it on the system. And,
there you go.
Yeah.
And you can see how this has become a passion for Robin. Love this for all these years. Not only does Robin do CW on our section net, she goes to the region net and goes all the way up to the area net and back, and handles the traffic that's going up and down those green lines. And it's interesting to note, although you may doubt it on first glance, that on CW we can handle about twice as much traffic per unit of time than can be handled on voice nets. Why? We don't have to take time to spell words on CW. They're already all spelled out for the receiving station. On voice, when you say bars, I spell Bravo, Alpha, Romeo, Charlie, Zulu, Sierra Zulu. Then you get it spelled right, but you have to go through the protocol, which takes time. So that's what a typical NTS operator does, although Robin is not typical. She's about 3 levels above. And we have a tremendous team of operators throughout the country that man these nets for all the sections, 71 sections in the United States, all over the country, and they come to work every day. Unlike yours, which might practice once a week or twice a month or once a month, NTS people are there every day, not necessarily the same ones every night or on every net, but the team makes sure all the nets operate. They're kind of like your telephone exchange. When you pick up the phone, the net's got to be there to pass the radiogram. These nets all meet on a fixed schedule, and they meet regularly 365 or 6 days a year. So
Al, how much of the traffic is passed by CW in these manual nets, and how much on phone nets?
The evening cycle from 7 to 10 is almost all CW nationwide. And during the daytime, most of it is on voice. And right now, the traffic variant between the two is 50-50, 30-70, and it can switch opposite directions at any moment. It depends really how the originators are posting a lot of our volume traffic into the system. If they post it digitally, it pops up in different outlets than if it's posted manually. So the answer to your question is, It varies quite a bit, but still a very significant fraction of it is handled on CW for the obvious efficiency. Over.
Okay, that's good. I know. So there's space. There's room in the system for people who want to do CW, especially, but also there's plenty of phone operation and digital work too.
We have endless career opportunities. To keep a system like this running nationwide, you can see it takes many hundreds of people. And unfortunately, we lose people from time to time who have to move away from the area or become silent keys. And therefore, we need a constant stream of newcomers, whether they're old or young, coming into the system to learn the skills and develop the love for the process that Robin shared. So that's how the manual net system cycles, Bert. Let me press on to take a look at the national picture so you can flush that out. Here you see on the right-hand side of the diagram the blue eastern area net, in the middle the blue central net, and the western net on the left. And below the eastern area net you see first, second, third, fourth, and eighth region nets with their liaisons upward. And although not shown, each one of those region nets has a number of section net representatives. In Maryland, we have only one going up because Maryland, District of Columbia, and Delaware are combined. But also into the third region net, there's a Pennsylvania traffic net rep who handles eastern and western PA. In the first region, you have reps from Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, for example. So they have more section nets checking first region. But if you look down the list, considering eighth region picks up West Virginia and Ohio, etc., Michigan, all of the sections in the eastern area belong to one of those 5 red region nets. And the region nets meet twice a night or twice in the day, depending upon which part of the country you're in, and handle the traffic going from the sections up to the area nets. So they're like funnels on that Christmas tree. Now, an example, if over on the right-hand side of the screen, if I had a message for Denver, I might put it into the local net here in Baltimore, and it's given to a net represented by a green line, goes to the section early net here in Maryland. A little later on, that's at 7 o'clock, by the way, in the evening. It goes to the third region net at 7:45. It can't get off there, so it goes up the green liaison TX to eastern area. It's given to the western area rep, the top green line. It goes all the way over to the western area net. It meets a couple of hours later. In their time zone, of course, they're still meeting in roughly the same frame as we do, but they're in Pacific time or Central or Mountain time. They're combined. And the western area net passes that Colorado message down to the 12th region net, and among the sections who reside there are Colorado, shown as the block orange with the CO above it on the left extreme, and it passes that traffic to the Denver local net representative, and it gets delivered that evening. So it starts at 7 o'clock here, and by the time the local nets meet the second time on the West Coast, it gets delivered. If you reverse the situation, the liaisons up at the top from IATN and TCC would bring traffic back from the western area to the eastern area net meeting in the early afternoon here on the East Coast the following day. So there's a transition time there because of the time zone. He may that night try and catch some late region nets, but that's a shotgun approach, and only the Top Gun liaisons are fast enough to catch them and get traffic moving. But whenever we hear somebody come in from IATN or TCC on any of our nets, he gets immediate top priority because he's got a billion things to do. It's a busy bee. So that's how traffic moves on the NTS. You can imagine a local net or section net connected to any of those regions can post traffic in a similar fashion, and it gets routed by the message addressee throughout the system till it gets back to a section or local net for delivery. Piece of cake. Okay. Now here's what the map looks like for that. You can see here on the East Coast, first, second, third, fourth, and eighth in the circles. Also, we have a former net called ECN for Eastern Canada. That's now merged with the second region. We also had an Atlantic region net that's now handled by some Caribbean liaisons, along with Puerto Rico, into the fourth region. So the Atlantic region net is kind of a ghost, but it's there to run if the load demands. Remember, our TCC people and IATM people carry traffic from eastern to central, which you see here, and the green, white, and tan sections, including Canada's, are in these respective regions, 5, 9, and 10, and therefore traffic coming from the East Coast would go to the central area net. For Illinois, would be given ninth region would pass it to Illinois section, and so forth. And you can see it can work exactly the same way on the West Coast. 7th region handling all the purple states and the dark red states, 12th region TWN, and 6th region Hawaii, Nevada, and California. That's a handy map, so when you're going to give a message to a local net and you take it to region and then take it to area, you have to know where to send it or what liaison to give it to. This map allows you to tell which region the destination state is in, such as Wisconsin, it's 9th, and it's central, so you know what the net routing would be. You don't have to worry about it. You just give it to the local liaison. The career liaison stations are the ones that have to worry about what net to give it to. Kind of equipment that's necessary to use on these manual voice and CW nets. Obviously, the local nets can use a handy talkie or a desktop or movie or radio, ground plane, J-pole, Yagi, etc., etc. With simple power supplies and or batteries and emergency supplies, and be prepared to work with ARCNEM people and various mobile activation teams that might come into the section so that you can communicate with them. You might like to have optional interfaces with a computer and TNCs for packet, digital traffic network, and WinLink. So a laptop computer is very handy to have in the shack if for nothing else, and copying your radiograms and logging your net performance and or being net control running nets right on a spreadsheet. So all the totals are there for you when you're done, having to add numbers or take your socks off. And in the third column for HF, any kind of HF rigs, most section nets run on 80 meters, sometimes 40, and even sometimes in winter on 160. So a good multi-band antenna, end-fed half waves or fan dipoles are popular for these purposes. Verticals are generally not good for local section nets since they don't transmit anything straight up. And when you're talking to somebody 50 miles away, you're going almost straight up to get back down to it. And if he's on the other side of the hill, he can't hear your ground wave. So you need an antenna that has a pattern that sends power straight up, along with all the other directions you might like. And that's typical of what the stations look like. Here's a note about the radiogram. I'm not going to teach all the details of every block in the preamble of a radiogram, but suffice it to say that this is the tracking and responsibility portion of a radiogram. It's assigned a message number by you, the originating station. That never changes thereafter. The second box for precedence defines the class of station that you, class of message in terms of handling precedence. Routine is represented as R. P is in priority, which means time is of the essence. W is welfare traffic for public welfare that may require special net direction, etc., depending upon how that's being handled, or interfaces with Red Cross, etc. And emergency is always written down in full, and emergency communications are not limited to amateur radio. Use whatever means you can use to save somebody's life. in an emergency. That's a special top category of traffic. Seldom do we use radiograms for that purpose. Block 3 is optional. Handling instructions tell the operators along the way any special requests you have. There's an appendix at the end of this presentation that lists the handling instructions. So if you want somebody to hold a message until the 14th of the month, you can put a code in there for that, each Hotel X-Ray Foxtrot, followed by the date, and a message is held. That way you can delay a birthday greeting until the day before. The station of origin is the person who originates the message and posts it into this network. The check in box 5 is the number of groups in the text. You'll see what that looks like in a moment. The place of origin, this is a trick question for the written exam, so make note of it. The place of origin is the location of the person for whom you are creating the message, thus the person signing the message and authorizing it, not the location of you at the station of origin. That's important because that agency of the person signing the message is preserved in the place of origin. So in delivering the message, you can say, I have a message here from Joe in Podunk, Maryland. That probably is going to make some sense to the addressee. It wouldn't make any sense if the place of origin is where the station of origin is, in Baltimore. Time filed is optional. That's used when time filing is important to understanding the context of the radiogram, and in priority traffic it is often used. In routine traffic, seldom. The date is composed of 2 blocks, the month, 3-letter abbreviation, and the date figure with no leading zeros. There are also no leading zeros permitted for the message number. And the month and date and the time filed, if used, are always assumed to be Zulu time or UTC, which means in the evening at 2400 Zulu, the date changes. But it doesn't change here. So make sure that the radiogram blocks are properly filled out. If you're going to use a local time, such as Eastern Daylight Time on the message, then you have to make or force the date to agree with that. Here's what the radiogram looks like in the left-hand box under Legacy Radiogram. And note in permitted characters, the double asterisk, capital letters, figures, and slant bars in the note box at the bottom are mandatory. No exceptions. The X is used as a period. It's a standalone group. It's voiced as initial X-ray. R is used as a decimal point within figure groups, such as 155 decimal 26 would be sent in figures, fixed group figures 155 Romeo 26. Dot is used in place of the period in an email or URL when one is present. Dash is used to separate the long zips from one another. And the @ sign, which a lot of people shorten to @ is actually a symbol. And it's the commercial sales unit price symbol, the @ A with a circle around it. And since that's a punctuation symbol, it has to be transmitted as the word @ sign, not @ If you send it as @ the guy on the other end writes @ down, and he really needs to have @ sign to know how to post that address. Now, going back up to the email or the radiogram itself, excuse me, I have a fast forward law here. I'll put the D10 on. But here's the preamble we just discussed in the top line. Here's the addressee. It can be 4 lines or 5 lines. John Doe with a call sign if he has one. The street address, the city, state, and zip, telephone number, email introduced by the word email so that the receiving operator doesn't get surprised when he hears Juliet Delta following the telephone number. And you notice the email address has been reworded or rewritten into words from what was originally in the email address, which was initials Juliet Delta symbol for @ domain, period, net. It's written into words here so that it can be transmitted by voice as initials Julia Delta, @ domain dot net. And we normally spell the dot and spell the net. So there's no mistaking it. And domains come with all kinds of screwy names, so we usually spell those as well. And an op note is optional, which can have information in it like shown regarding delivery tips. Then we have an interesting BT here, and that doesn't mean anything other than the old CW da 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 da, which is an equal sign, which is a break. It was from the old Phillips code, means a paragraph break. And a BT, being an equal sign in CW, which can also be entered here as an equal sign if you insist, is a break that indicates the start of the text. And it's always followed by a listening pause. The text is usually written out in 5 groups per line. Notice a group is any single character or any 2 or more characters concatenated, that is, with no space between them, over the white space on the left and a white space on the right. So, for example, the word maps is one group because it has 4 characters concatenated with a white space on the left and on the right. You've got all these groups here, 5, 10, 15, 16. You see the check in the preamble. It says how many groups are present. This is the authorizing signature after another BT, which marks the end of the text, and an optional op note. And there are records that we keep at the bottom of a radiogram, from whom we received it, on what net, date and time, and to whom we sent or delivered it, or net and date time, so that we can track the message later. That goes hand in glove with the preamble, so that we can track a message anywhere in the system. Well, that's what the legacy radiogram looks like. Anybody have any questions on radiograms and how we push the radiograms through the system?
I don't see any questions.
Outstanding. We confused everybody, or everybody understands it, or maybe a mixture. Next, the digital traffic network, which you want to press on for the sake of time here tonight. This is the RRI Digital Traffic Network, managed by Radio Relay International, called the Digital Traffic Network, and it is an HF Factor hub system, mesh linked all over the country, with hub stations roughly in all the regions and in the areas to pass traffic, very much like we pass it on the manual nets, but it's all done by HF polling, which automatically allow the stations to connect to each other, pass the traffic going that way, and disconnect with forward error correcting, 100% error free, or the message doesn't pass. If that persists, the hub dynamics cause the message to be rerouted through other hubs to get to its destination. Hence, I loosely call it a mesh network. It's sort of a poor man's version of that, but very effective. We can upload large numbers of individual radiograms into it very quickly with the VAR or Factor equipment, or VAR packet on VHF, UHF, and you can handle both the legacy and hybrid radiogram. Remember, the hybrid is the one with the email formatted text, but everything else is the same as the legacy radiogram in their preamble address and signature, op notes, etc. Digital traffic network. Notice the similarity in structure. Here's that same stack of region nets, but now they're hubs. An eastern, central, and western area hub. Section digital traffic stations, or section hub. That varies around the country. Some sections don't have hubs. They're pretty expensive to operate. Require an HF station that can check multiple frequencies in one band, and usually 3 to 5 other bands. so that stations anywhere can check into them on whatever band is working with the prop at that moment. And that applies all over the country. So when you check into the third region hub, if you don't make it on 80, you can switch to 40 and connect to him on 40 and pass your traffic from Maryland Digital Traffic Station to the third region hub. Messages are routed the same way as in the manual system. So the third region traffic going to New York would go up to the second region hub by direct forwarding, and from there would go down to their section levels for digital delivery or manual delivery to local nets. In Maryland, most of our traffic, very always greater than 50% here in the last year, comes via this DTN path into the Maryland section net or delivered via our local nets. And it's superb in quality because it all comes via backdoor on this network, forward aircraft are free. And you don't see errors in the network. What you see is typos that the originators put in the message when they enter it into the system. That's why it's so wonderful to use reserved agencies, because we can let the officials make their own spelling mistakes. We say, you made them. We send them just like you posted. And we always get left with a bit of that. But traffic is routed across the hubs and into the nets in the same way as the manual system. If traffic sits on a hub too long, the mesh scheme reroutes them. Regions here in the eastern area can actually connect to regions in central, for example. Some of them can even on 20 meters connect to some of the western regions. So there's multiple interconnection opportunities in the hub ops based on their experience and how the prop is going this solar cycle or this time in the cycle can determine what layers of rerouting are necessary to ensure the traffic moves. Wonderful system. It was developed originally as the old National Traffic System Digital, which are originally codified into the Public Service Communications Manual in 2004. But the system had been working with various digital modes almost 20 years before that. The League only mentioned it as digital modes up to that time. So that's how traffic moves in the digital network. The equipment used, as I mentioned before, is a Vera or a Pactor for your local hub station in section or region. The areas usually have more TNCs and more frequencies, so their dynamic flexibility is greater. If you're a client or a digital traffic station and you're using the Express software from WinLink, which is a free download, you can use Vera HF and HF Pactor and Vera Packet. So you can work all the modes and send messages with Express from your laptop through the appropriate TNCs. For Pactor, you need an SCS modem. Dragon, they're expensive. They're about $2,000, but they work with signal levels all the way down to sub-noise levels. And client or DTS stations running airmail, the old original sailboat email system, can use packet TNCs to connect to other gateways and HF Pactor to do likewise. So the digital traffic network, which runs in parallel with our manual system, is now handling more traffic than the manual traffic net. But the manual traffic net still remains the essential backbone last resort communication network in the country. This is becoming one of our preeminent radiogram legacy and hybrid movers in the country. The message is the same in all respects with regard to the radiogram of the legacy format, except that the text may be an email format if it's a hybrid. And the batch file that you see mentioned has to do with the uploads that go into the hub stations that contain an ST line that contains the zip code and the NTS state designator with an @ sign that allows the hub to immediately route the station to that zip code and state anywhere in the country without having to know any more. In other words, the message goes right on its way, headed that direction. The town line that contains Podunk Hollow and the area code in exchange for the telephone number is there so that the hub bulletin board screens allow a potential downloading station who wants to manually help take traffic for delivery can see where each message is going without having to open the whole message up. And that's what the digital traffic network message looks like. Piece of cake. In fact, one of our locals here at MDC has written a program called the Parser, P-A-R-S-E-R. Contact the MDC section manager. I'll put you in touch with him. And it takes the radiogram and creates dispatch file automatically, as well as looking up the zip code and checking the radiogram for errors. A beautiful, powerful piece of software for which he got ARL Distinguished Service Award. This is something that a hybrid radiogram might look like for the digital traffic network. Notice the text is full of punctuation of all kinds, figures and upper and lower case, periods and parentheses. That all can be transmitted directly on the DTN as typed. And it can also be sent by voice by using such treachery as a symbol of transmission. For example, where it says C folder, that might be sendable in voice, and watch out for the huge overload. Initial Charlie, which applies uppercase, symbol for colon, symbol for backslash, lowercase, Mike, Alpha, Papa, Sierra. That's all one big mixed group I'm sending, by the way. Symbol for backslash, uppercase, Golf, Oscar, Echo, Sierra. Symbol for backslash, uppercase, Mike, Delta, Charlie. Although uppercase is sticky, just so the receiving operator doesn't forget, doesn't do any harm to repeat it. Symbol for backslash, title case, incident, I spell India, November, Charlie, India, Delta, Echo, November, Tango, figures tree 4, be sent as a mixed group. But if you send it title case, that first letter is capitalized. And therefore you can transmit all this mess. But you hear there's probably as much overhead in doing it as there is content. Hence, we much prefer to push this kind of traffic on the digital traffic network. Also, there are classes that flags can be placed in that town line so that service messages and routine and welfare and priority traffic, etc., can be flagged so that the hub operator can make sure that priority messages get kicked on, even if there's a backlog of routine traffic because of a hub problem somewhere along the line. He'll make darn sure that there's a route found to get that priority traffic on its way. And the same for batches of welfare traffic. So there are lots of things we can do on the digital traffic network that are not provided for in the operation of our manual nets. The last, and hopefully we'll get out here at a reasonable hour for you tonight, is the digital radio email network. But before I proceed, anyone have any questions on the manual net system that have come to mind since we presented the digital part, or the digital traffic network itself?
I see no questions here.
Outstanding. We're going to do very well on the written test at the end. WinLink is a very unique network. Everybody knows what an RFC 822 email looks like. It has a 2-line, and you can put multiple addresses in it, and a copies line, and you can put multiple addresses there too, and a 2-line in which you put the address of the individual, username, @ domain.net or org or whatever the case might be. On WinLink, all the clients are registered in the central system as @winlink.org. So to send a message to anybody on WinLink anywhere in the world, in the to line, you put his callsign and @winlink.org, and he'll get it within minutes. And if you have to connect by radio, the time limit will be how long it takes your radio bandwidth to that is the baud rate of your TNC, to actually get the message posted on the WinLink. Once it's on WinLink, it's on the central server in milliseconds. And even if it's posted on one of the central message servers in Germany, and it's serviced all over the world in seconds. Anyhow, the gateways through which you make those connections are HF, running HF backdoor, and now they also run Vera HF in most cases, or many cases. And they're connected by telnet over the internet to these central mail servers. They can also go radio all the way, which is a failure mode, which means they can operate independent of the infrastructure in a national emergency. There are also backbones that interlink on opposing frequencies, 220 to 2 meters, 440, 2 meters, etc., that run through many sections, like up and down the east coast of Florida and the East Coast Packet Network. And somewhere tacked along the line will be a TNC that's connected in to one of these gateways, a tri-mode packet gateway, which is a neat little animal that's registered to operate within packet range of your group of areas or section operators. And when you post a message on it, it goes through the telnet connection to the central message server. So the recipient halfway across the country gets it in a minute or two. If you have to send it to this gateway station on the packet at 1200 baud, it might take a little longer. If you have to transmit it on a real slow TNC, like an old 100 bit per second job, it's like molasses going uphill in the wintertime, but it'll get there. Once the gateway station computer has it, however, it bursts out on the telnet and is gone in seconds. This interesting little gateway, however, is one of the most powerful researches we have in EMCOM today. Because if it loses its internet connection, two things happen. One, the box becomes a server, so all of the normal people living in this domain in range of the gateway station can post a message on it, and the other station, who is the addressee, can retrieve it. So it acts exactly like a bulletin board or your email server. You upload it, it's kind of like an SMTP upload, and when the other guy checks it, he gets the mail just like a POP3 download. And it sits there and operates like that all day long, as long as it has emergency power on it. That means all the comm for all these people in range is taken care of during the emergency, even though the internet has failed. But there's another beautiful feature, and that is your traffic doesn't get stuck there, because the messages in the server for people that are not on the local user list can be sent out over HF by the gateway software called HF Relay, and the messages are passed to other HF gateways where they get into the system. So if this gateway was in Maryland and the internet's all down, and you post a message here going to the headquarters in Newington, Connecticut, it's going to go out via HF backdoor to an HF gateway somewhere. Doesn't matter where it is. Could be in northern Florida, and it'll get on telnet, go up to the servers, and W1AW will check by any one of the means convenient to it, and you'll get your message. So even when all the internet goes away, as long as you can keep this tri-mode packet gateway alive, your local traffic is handled immediately. Your out of area traffic goes out via either Vera packet or tri-mode control over an HF relay modem. That's a very powerful resource. Now, as clients, you can have the old airmail software, which is a free download. You can run HF Pactor and packet with that and be able to connect to any of these packet or HF gateway stations. If you're running WinLink Express, you can run VeraHF or HF Pactor, VHF, UHF to connect to any of those gateways. In both cases, you can use Telnet Direct if you wish, which is very fast, over which you can handle very large volumes of attachments quickly. And if you're running PackLink, you can actually have your local agency, local area network on Ethernet tied to the station, and they can give the areas out an email message from their normal email app with an account set up for the PackLink station, and the PackLink operator can send it out to the gateways, which means no writing, no copying errors, all digital all the way. Very powerful. And of course, in the addresses of WinLink radio email messages, you can mix client addresses, such as callsign at winlink.org, with public internet addresses, such as W1AW and ARRL.org. And they'll be able to collect it. So here's an example of a radio email message. Looks familiar. In the address line, W1AW at winlink.org, W83QPX at ARL.net. Two messages go out because of that line, one to W1AW, one to W83QPX, but it's passed from the WinLink system onto the public internet, so he gets it through the lead reflector. Likewise, the copies to K3JL and WV1X at headquarters go out in similar fashion. Subject line is standard. The information in the text is email formatted, however you like. All the QWERTY punctuation is permitted. We can't use the 3-character ASCII boxes and stuff. This is strictly the standard email punctuation, just like your regular email and email app. And you can connect attachments such as zip files, JPEG, or text files, which are used often to transmit one or more radiograms. We don't count checks on radio emails. We just type in the message or receive it from the local client, and it's posted out either on the internet, via packet, or HF Pactor or Vera. Now, often you hear people talk about a message form often used on WinLink or on amateur radio called the General ICS 213 form. There are many other forms in the FEMA Emergency Communications pamphlet under the National Incident Management System slash National Incident Command System, which include message forms for all the frequencies in use by the stations in your area, etc. and so forth. But this one is the general message form often used by officials to send messages to people, perhaps requesting replies, and a reply section at the bottom. It's a box multi-copy carbonless form published by many emergency operating systems and served agencies. And of course, you note the one thing missing from it is any kind of tracking accountability for use on a radio system. Consequently, what we do with ICS 213s is to use an application like FL Message, which is a function of FL Digi, an application that's free for amateurs. I may have a fee for the fast version, but it will take an ICS interactive message form and export the contents to a text message that looks just like this under the extracted text column. So you can see it's email formatted with title case titles, with block numbers, with periods ending in colons, and that's all email formatted stuff and whatever is filled in on the block, such as incident name here on the ICS 213, follows the colon in this text export and may be any number of lines long, depending upon how much time you have to send it. So it's very easy to handle ICS forms this way, as attached text forms on a radio email that go out, hands off, no copying errors, digital, forward error corrected, 0 errors, all the way to the destination. And they're delivered by email on the far end at the other end of the country most of the time. So that's how we handle ICS 213. You may hear people trying to handle them on voice, where they use a name, like the incident name might be potluck, and they'll just say potluck and assume it's formatted like a radiogram with all caps. And they may be playing by rules that day, but technically we as servers of these agencies do not have agency to change the format of their content. Hence, if it's a title case content, we have to send it that way if we want to be true to that obligation. Local areas may have different opinions on that, so be prepared. This is what an ICS form content derived as text might look like. What a mess. Imagine sending that with the voice protocol. There'd be twice as much stuff to send. And in fact, 100% overhead sometimes is an optimistic estimate. But typed into the interactive form with FL message and exported into this text form and tacked on the bottom end of a radio email, it's a piece of cake. We let the customer type it up on the ICS form on his PC local network, and they pass it to us, and we use that FL message to create this text form. They can even do that for us as well. If we put this into the hybrid radiogram, you'll notice here's a preamble in the gray box in the lower right, an address, city, state, zip, phone number, email, etc. And between the two breaks, which mark the text territory, goes all that red stuff on the left. What a mess. But it's a powerful resource, and our agencies are impressed when we can handle traffic this way, and our worth to them goes up. Anybody have any questions about the WinLink system? That wraps up Network 3.
I want to know if I can be heard.
Yes.
Okay. If after any questions, I have just a real short 5-sentence explanation about why I'm a ham radio operator that you might find interesting. So.
All right. With all these options, why don't you do that now and whet everybody's appetite?
You can look this up on the internet to get the whole picture, but in 1969 there was an explosion on the USS Enterprise ship in the Navy. They were down by New Zealand, and my uncle was on that ship. He was we knew where he was for about 2 weeks. We didn't know if he was alive, and the night that we found out, there was an amateur radio who the report went from New Zealand to wherever it went to Baltimore to my parents' house, saying that your brother, your uncle is still alive. And when I got a chance to be an amateur radio operator, thanks be to God, I've never had to do this, but I'm ready. I'm ready to do it. There you go.
Great story.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, Robin. Now you can see the passion of their NDS people and why they're so devoted. Also, I might mention that we often interface with Mars, and we've handled tons of messages from servicemen overseas. We don't do so much of it here lately because of their advanced satellite system and security concerns. But on a number of occasions, I've had considerable difficulty trying to find a working phone number for a wife sitting on the edge of her porch trying to find out if her husband had made it safely to wherever. And I've resorted to the ubiquitous crisscross, which some of you might be familiar with, 411 services with lookups, so that you can find the telephone number of the next door neighbor if she doesn't have a listed phone. And I've called the next door neighbor and explained with great care and some difficulty who I was and what I was about and why I was pestering her. I was saying, could you go next door and bang on the door and bring Mrs. Jones over? I have a message for her from her husband from overseas. And oh boy, that causes instant cooperation, and we've gotten them through that way. So that's what we do in the NTF. It doesn't matter how the message got to us. We still have to have savvy to post them and savvy to deliver them. And the impacts can be profound, particularly if you don't know if your relative has made it or not. Well, how do we do this in MDC? This is sort of a mirror reflection of wherever you live in the country. We have a net diagram that looks like somebody threw colored spaghetti on the wall. In the afternoons, the Eastern Area Net of Cycle 2 meets at 2:30 or roughly in the afternoon, passes traffic down to the third region by voice, single sideband. It meets at 4 o'clock. That traffic comes into the MEPN, the Maryland Emergency Phone Net. We also get traffic that comes over here from Delaware directly on occasion. And we also have a representative in blue from the Digital Traffic Network, where we're getting 60% or more of our traffic. So all this stuff lands on MEPN, and we sort it out and pass it to stations who can deliver it. Our outbound traffic here on MEPN, which meets at 6 p.m. local time in the summer, or 2200 Zulu all year long, with a pre-net a half an hour earlier. That net also handles outbound traffic, and that traffic is picked up on MEPN by 2 reps. One carries it to the local Baltimore traffic net for local delivery, and the MDD rep picks it up on this orange liaison line to carry it to MDD to pick up the Christmas tree, which you now are familiar with, to pass the traffic during the evening cycle. And that's where BTN might have created that message for Colorado I showed you earlier, which is passed on the purple liaison line to MDD. He passes it to third region. He goes up to Eastern and is passed to the Western Area Net Rep, and off it goes across the country. If he had a message for Podunk Hollow in Pennsylvania, it would go into the third region rep. He would have held it until the late session and given it to his EPA or WPA or Pennsylvania Traffic Net Rep, and it would have gotten delivered that night if he had the courage to make a phone call after 10 p.m. Otherwise, he might do it in the morning. In any case, the rest of the traffic from Maryland comes down to us, and we have the same dilemma. Linked into all these nets are WinLink representatives, which we call WL2K reps. And here's the WL2K system, where our packet and relay connect to the WinLink system, and the WL2K HF backdoor stations, which are DTS stations, linked to WinLink directly on the mesh. And we also have Digital Traffic Network hub stations. Third region hub is where our DTN guys here in MDC connect to post traffic and to receive traffic. That's that traffic I mentioned a moment ago, comes in from DTN, comes all the way over here to MEPN or to the BTN or MDD for delivery as warranty. The outbound traffic can go up. We always give preference to manual so we don't starve that system out. Once you lose manual cadre, it's hard to get them back. So our digital network, even though it runs in parallel with the manual system, you can see still is handling 60 or more percent of the national traffic, which says we need more manning for the manual net system particularly at lower levels. Food for thought. This is a summary of things you can do as an amateur to help. Learn how to format, transmit, receive, and deliver radiograms. How to participate in your section in local nets. How the manual networks run, particularly for the digital applications of DTN and WinLink. How to establish and indoor man an amateur station with areas at a local shelter or command post 24/7 and provide the equipment, antennas, power, personal needs to be self-sufficient and work as many of those three network layers as you possibly can, even if it's only with an HT. Learn how to support areas, mobile activation teams, where you might get 6, 10, dozens, or hundreds of amateurs coming in from elsewhere in the country, depending upon the size of a disaster. You have to work with all those folks. You need to get to know them. That means common protocols. They need to know what frequencies you're on. That means you need to have common diagrams that they can refer to in order to know where to meet your nets and get involved quickly. Learn how to reach outside the infrastructure last mile. WinLink does that beautifully. If you send a message on WinLink to a Florida gateway and the fellow up in the north end of Maryland, and there's no internet going, once he gets his message, he could connect to a WinLink gateway in Michigan or one in New Jersey, up north near New York, and his message would be sitting there waiting for him because those gateways are in touch with the central servers. The minute you check into any gateway, if there's any traffic waiting for you on the system, the list is there. It knows to pass that traffic down to you. Magically dynamic system. So WinLink is beautiful for last mile. And the digital traffic network, likewise, if you can reach the hub stations by HF outside of the affected area, you can upload tons of welfare traffic or pass it to them by WinLink. Learn how to sustain yourself and your family first and foremost while being able to provide these services. If you're a gung-ho guy, grabs your Aries hat or HT, runs out of the house, leaving your wife and children with no means to escape the flood, you have not played by the amateur code. Learn how to do all these things before the emergency develops. It'll be too late then, and you probably won't even get to participate because we need people during emergency on the nets who know how to move the traffic on one of these three networks and get it going, not to have to teach somebody how to go through and properly transmit a radiogram by voice with the introducers and spelling necessary to get it exactly right. I haven't demonstrated much of that here tonight for the sake of time, but it's an art form. Join in your local nets and your section traffic manager will locate those, and they'll be glad to teach you all you need to know about how to do this. In Maryland, therefore, we have a Maryland Emergency Phone Net, 3820 daily, every day of the year at 2200. Baltimore Traffic Net, every day of the year, 6:30 p.m. on either the 6-7 repeater in Baltimore or the 6805 repeater in Northern Anne Arundel County, which we're using right now. 6-7 has a malfunction. We also have Echolink connections to both of those repeaters, so you can look them up in 3FQC or KA2TAI on the repeater connection list. You can actually connect to those repeaters direct and check in from New York to the Baltimore Traffic Net. Here's Robin's Net MDD on 3557 every day of the year, and she has liaison up to the region nets and so on. And the last one, which I haven't talked about yet, is for those people learning how to clean the contacts on J38 and then use it, called the Maryland Slow Net. This net meets on 3563 every day at 7:30 The net manager is November 3, Alpha Echo Alpha in 3AEA. And therefore, if you're in range on 80 meters at night, listen for him. When he calls for stations to check into the net using QNI or simply MSNK, check in with your full call sign and he'll greet you and ask your name, whether you'd like to take radiogram and net training via MSN, and you'll be assigned an instructor, and you will be sent off the net frequency, and the instructor will send you radiogram after radiogram after radiogram, as many as you want that given night. And you can come back 2 or 3 days later, pick up where you left off, until you've gotten all the radiograms in that particular training group. The first being formatting, the second being checking into nets and exchanging the message, and the third net operations, etc. So by the time you graduate MSN, you're ready to jump right into MDD as an active traffic handler. Prime resources for some of the ARRL. That current section web page, which is in work and not fully up to date yet, is at arl-mdc.org. That's the old .net page, and there's an NTS page associated with it. That'll be updated soon. The ARL headquarters at Newington is at arl.org. And WinLink is at www.winlink.org. And if you go there, huge for facts page, and there are 1,000 questions on there. If you read through it over a few months, you'll learn everything there is to know about WinLink and maybe more. Anybody have any questions? Because that just about wraps up everything you need to know about traffic handling. Here are your handling instructions in the appendices. A summary of the introducers used to voice messages when you're operating on voice. Watch Robin put her tongue in her mouth and go, since it's much better to do on CW. And operational words that we use that have special meaning. An appendix of the ITU phonetic alphabet. Please use these generously and only these. Notice the pronunciation: papa for the P, tree for the 3, fife is in fife and drum for the 5, and niner for the 9. If you're born between 1945, you might say fiber. Please don't. That confuses younger operators that are now trained in the ITU alphabet. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. And here's the great trivia question of the night. Roger does not mean yes. So when you hear people talking, they say, "Are you going to the AMPS tomorrow?" And the guy says, "Roger," it means he received and understood the question, but he hadn't answered it yet. So what you do is you say, "Are you going to the AMPS tomorrow?" And he says, "Roger." And you say, "Are you going to the AMPS tomorrow?" Until he gets it. The answer is yes, or no, Charlie, or affirmative. And if you start understanding that Roger means we all received and understood and does not mean yes, you'll start sounding like a pro. That's like 73s. This is with an S on the end. 73 from the old Phillips code days means best regards. It's 2 digits, and it's not 73s since it's already plural. It just figures 7-3, and it means best regards with the S on the end. So if you say 7-3 to people, you'll sound like a pro. Now for the questions. Anyone with any questions on all of our networks?
I think you're clear.
Outstanding. Now for the written test.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much for running us through that. As you pointed out, obviously this is an exposure to what's out there. 1 hour and a half session isn't going to take you from novice to expert level, but there's plenty of help. Both links that you provided here, written help and in-person help as well. And as you can see, it can be habit forming. So, and Robin hasn't broken the habit yet after all these many, many years. So I did it for, I don't know, maybe 10 years I did it. And when I was in the service, I handled a lot of traffic out of the Aberdeen Proving Grounds for incoming students. I used to give out a little slip of paper that they could all say I arrived safely at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, and probably sent 1,000 messages over a period of a year.
I tell all the new guys the first 10,000 messages you handle are the hardest. I started doing this back in '54. I think I'm up over 35 or 40,000 now. I stopped counting. They're in big boxes of moth gathering paper. But I can still find some messages handled during Hurricane Hazel in 1954 if I look hard enough and there's any of them left. So it becomes a passion. Thank you all for hosting us. As usual, a bringer of great wisdom and culture into the amateur community. 7-3 to everyone.
Well, thank you guys. You couldn't do it without the help of all these wonderful presentations. Wish you all the best. Thank you all for, I'm going to close the recording now. And I want to thank everyone who's attended these sessions. It's been a pleasure to bring them to you. Don't forget, you can come back next year